click that subscribe button right now, because you won't believe how this story ends. I'm about to tell you about the most feared student at Riverside High and how one moment changed everything. The clicking of designer heels echoed through the empty hallway of Riverside High. Jessica Chen walked with the confidence of someone who owned the place, and in many ways she did. Her Gucci bag swung rhythmically against her hip as she approached room 237, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching a paper with a red B circled at the top. A B. The grade was an insult, a declaration of war from the new English teacher who clearly didn't understand how things worked at Riverside High. MS. Rodriguez. Jessica's voice dripped with artificial sweetness as she pushed open the classroom door. We need to discuss my grade. The young teacher looked up from her desk, dark eyes meeting Jessica's with unexpected steadiness. Other teachers usually looked away first. They all knew about the Chen family's influence. Jessica's father hadn't donated the new science wing for nothing. Jessica, MS. Rodriguez said, setting down her red pen. I was actually hoping to talk to you about your essay. Perfect. Jessica strode forward, dropping the paper onto MS. Rodriguez's desk. Because I think there's been a mistake. No mistake, MS. Rodriguez picked up the essay, flipping to the second page. Your technical writing is excellent, but your analysis of Gatsby's motivations is surface level at best. You didn't engage with the deeper themes of the novel. Jessica's practiced smile flickered. She leaned forward, perfectly highlighted hair falling over one shoulder. MS. Rodriguez, I don't think you understand. I don't get B's. Ever. My father. Your father is on the school board. Yes, I know. MS. Rodriguez stood up, and though she was shorter than Jessica, something in her posture made the student step back. But in this classroom, you earn your grades through your work, not your last name. The silence that followed was electric. Jessica's hands trembled slightly before she clenched them into fists. Nobody talked to her like this. Not since 7th grade, when she'd learned exactly how to make people regret crossing her. You're new here, Jessica said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. So let me explain how things work. That science wing with my family's name on it, that's not just decoration. One phone call from my father, and you'll be teaching at some public school in the bad part of town. Is that what you want? MS. Rodriguez's eyes widened, not with fear, but with something else, disappointment, maybe even pity. Are you threatening me, Jessica? Because if you are, we should continue this conversation in Principal Warner's office. Jessica's face flushed red. The familiar rush of power she usually felt was replaced by something uncomfortable, something that felt dangerously like shame. She pushed the feeling away, straightening to her full height. You're going to regret this, she hissed, turning on her heel and storming out. In the hallway, Sarah Williams pressed herself against the lockers, trying to become invisible as Jessica passed. Sarah, with her second-hand clothes and quiet demeanor, had managed to stay off Jessica's radar so far she watched as Jessica pulled out her phone, perfectly manicured nails flying over the screen. Sarah knew what that meant. She'd seen it before. By tomorrow there would be rumors about MS. Rodriguez. Whispers in the hallway. Anonymous posts on the school's social media pages. That's how it always started. 3 months ago, it had been Mr. Peters, the chemistry teacher who dared to call Jessica out for cheating. He'd resigned 2 weeks later after his private emails were mysteriously leaked. Before that, it was Emma Porter, the student body president who'd beaten Jessica in the election. She'd transferred schools after a month of relentless cyberbullying. Sarah? Are you okay? Sarah jumped, realizing MS. Rodriguez had stepped into the hallway. The teacher's face was concerned, but there was steel in her spine that Sarah hadn't seen in other teachers. I'm fine, Sarah mumbled, clutching her books tighter. I heard everything. She's going to come after you. MS. Rodriguez smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I've dealt with bullies before. Not like Jessica, Sarah said, her voice barely a whisper. She doesn't just bully people, she destroys them. Inside her classroom, MS. Rodriguez watched Sarah hurry away. She pulled out her phone, opening her email to find 3 new messages from Principal Warner. All marked urgent, all about Jessica Chen. The war had already begun. Across campus, Jessica sat in her Range Rover, her phone connecting to her father's private line. Daddy? We need to talk about my new English teacher. In the faculty parking lot, Principal Warner loosened his tie, staring at the email from board member Chen. His hands shook slightly as he typed out a response, knowing that whatever he did next would either save his career or end it. And in the girls' bathroom, Sarah Williams splashed water on her face, trying to calm her racing heart. She looked in the mirror, seeing the fear in her own eyes. Something was different this time. MS. Rodriguez was different. For the first time in 3 years, someone had stood up to Jessica Chen, and Sarah had a terrible feeling that everyone at Riverside High was about to learn exactly why nobody ever did that. Don't forget to smash that like button if you want to know what happens next. The drama is just getting started, and trust me, you won't believe where this story goes. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now because things are about to get intense. Last time we saw Jessica Chen threaten her new English teacher. But what happened next? Trust me, you're not ready. The Instagram post appeared at exactly 3:47 a.m. prime time for rumors to spread before the school day began. An anonymous account with a single post, a heavily edited photo of Ms. Rodriguez at what appeared to be a college party, alongside a caption that suggested questionable behavior with students. By 7:30 a.m., everyone at Riverside High had seen it. Jessica sat in her car, watching students cluster in nervous groups as they entered the school. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from her followers, each one sharing and amplifying the rumors she'd carefully crafted. She smiled, but something felt off. The usual rush of satisfaction wasn't there. Jessica Ashley Martinez, her most loyal follower, tapped on the car window. Ms. Rodriguez is already here. She's in Principal Warner's office. Perfect. Jessica grabbed her bag and stepped out into the crisp morning air. What's everyone saying? That she'll probably resign by lunch. Ashley fell into step beside her, just like Mr. Peters did. But Ms. Rodriguez didn't resign. When Jessica walked into English class that afternoon, the teacher stood at the front of the room, calm and collected as ever. Today we're discussing reputation and social destruction in the crucible, Ms. Rodriguez announced, her eyes meeting Jessica's. Specifically, how false accusations can destroy lives. Jessica felt her face grow hot as several students turned to look at her. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. After class, Ms. Rodriguez called her aside. The Instagram post was creative, Jessica, but those photos were from a high school theater production where I played a student. I've already explained this to Principal Warner. I don't know what you're talking about, Jessica said smoothly. No, Ms. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Then you won't mind that the police cybercrime unit is investigating the post. For the first time in years, Jessica felt a flicker of real fear. She hurried out of the classroom, nearly colliding with Sarah Williams. But Sarah, the quiet girl who had witnessed their confrontation, who had probably heard everything. Watch where you're going, Jessica snapped, but then paused. A new plan forming. Actually, Sarah, I need your help with something. Sarah's eyes widened with fear. And was that hope? How pathetic. Over the next 2 weeks, Jessica executed her plan perfectly. She invited Sarah to sit with her at lunch, included her in group chats, even invited her to a weekend shopping trip. The transformation in Sarah was immediate. She walked taller, smiled more, dared to speak up in class. I can't believe how nice Jessica's being, Sarah told Ms. Rodriguez after class one day. Maybe she's really changing. Ms. Rodriguez frowned. Be careful, Sarah. Kindness from someone like Jessica usually comes with a price. She was right. The price came exactly 17 days later, during lunch period. Jessica stood up in the cafeteria, her voice carrying across the crowded room. Oh my God, Sarah, I can't believe you actually thought we were friends. Did you really think someone like me would want to hang out with someone like you? The cafeteria fell silent. Sarah sat frozen, her half-eaten lunch forgotten. Show them the texts, Jessica commanded, and Ashley projected screenshots onto the cafeteria wall using the presentation system. Private messages from Sarah, confessing her deepest insecurities, her family's financial struggles, her crush on Jessica's ex-boyfriend. Sarah ran from the cafeteria in tears. The familiar rush of power surged through Jessica, but it felt hollow. That evening, Jessica sat at her family's massive dining table, pushing food around her plate. Darling, is everything all right? Her mother asked. not looking up from her phone. You've barely touched your wagyu. Fine, Jessica mumbled. Just drama at school. Her father lowered his newspaper slightly. Speaking of school, that Rodriguez woman is becoming a problem. She's filed a formal complaint about grade manipulation. Don't worry, I'll handle it. Thanks, Daddy. The words felt ashy in her mouth. Later that night, Jessica couldn't sleep. She opened Instagram, scrolling through the aftermath of her latest victory. Hundreds of likes on posts mocking Sarah. Dozens of comments praising Jessica's epic takedown. Then she saw a single photo posted to Sarah's otherwise empty account. A bottle of pills on a bathroom counter. Something cold gripped Jessica's chest. This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't supposed to go this far. Her phone rang. MS. Rodriguez's name flashed on the screen. What do you want? Jessica answered, trying to sound bored. Sarah's in the hospital, MS. Rodriguez's voice was tight with fury. They pumped her stomach an hour ago. She's going to live, no thanks to you. I didn't. Jessica's perfect facade cracked. I didn't mean for. Listen carefully, Jessica, MS. Rodriguez cut her off. Tomorrow at 8 a.m., you're going to meet me in Principal Warner's office. We're going to discuss everything: the cyberbullying, the grade manipulation, the fake photos. Everything. Or I promise you, what happens next will make your little social media games look like child's play. Jessica ended the call with shaking hands. For hours she sat in her dark room, remembering Sarah's smile when she'd first invited her to lunch, remembering Mr. Peters' resignation letter, Emma Porter's tears, the countless others she'd tormented just because she could. For the first time since 7th grade, Jessica Chen cried. Hit that like button if you think Jessica's about to get what she deserves, and subscribe to find out what happens next, because tomorrow morning, everything changes. Before we continue, this part of the story deals with serious topics. If you or someone you know is struggling, remember you're not alone. The National Crisis Hotline is available 24/7. The morning after Sarah's suicide attempt dawned grey and cold. Jessica hadn't slept. She sat in Principal Warner's office, her usual perfect appearance showing signs of strained smudged mascara, wrinkled blazer, trembling hands. MS. Rodriguez sat across from her, face drawn with exhaustion. Principal Warner stood by the window, looking older than Jessica had ever seen him. Sarah's stable, MS. Rodriguez broke the silence. Her mother's with her at Mount Sinai. The doctors say she'll recover physically, but she let the words hang in the air. Jessica stared at her hands. The same hands that had typed those cruel messages, shared those private texts, orchestrated the public humiliation that had driven Sarah to. She couldn't even think the words. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. Didn't mean for what to happen, exactly, MS. Rodriguez's voice was quiet but sharp. Didn't mean to systematically isolate a vulnerable student. Didn't mean to gain her trust just to destroy her. Didn't mean to share her private messages with the entire school. Each question hit Jessica like a physical blow. The carefully constructed walls of justification she'd built around herself began to crumble. I just wanted, what had she wanted? Power? Control? To be feared? The office door opened. Students filed in silently. Ashley, Emma Porter, who had transferred back, even Mr. Peters. Each face carried the same expression, a mixture of anger, disappointment, and something worse, pity. These are just some of the people you've hurt, MS. Rodriguez said, standing. We're all here because what happened to Sarah isn't an isolated incident. It's the result of a pattern, a culture of cruelty that you've created. Jessica looked around the room, really looked, for the first time. Ashley's fake smile couldn't hide her fear. Emma's hands shook as she clutched her backpack. Mr. Peters stood in the corner, his once confident posture now hunched. Would you like to know what Sarah wrote in her note, MS? Rodriguez continued. She wrote that she finally understood why you'd been nice to her, because destroying someone means nothing if they don't trust you first. The words hit Jessica with the force of physical pain. In her mind, she saw Sarah's smile when she'd first invited her to lunch. The way her eyes had lit up when Jessica had complimented her dress. The trust she'd so carefully cultivated just to shatter it. Jessica's voice broke. I don't know why I do these things. Yes, you do, MS, Rodriguez said firmly. You do it because you can. Because your money and your family name have protected you from consequences. Because somewhere along the way you learned that power means making others feel powerless. The room was silent except for someone's quiet sobs. Ashley, Jessica realized with shock. But here's what you haven't learned yet, MS, Rodriguez continued, her voice softening slightly. Real power. Real strength. It's not about destruction, it's about responsibility. Accountability. The courage to face what you've done and work to make it right. Jessica felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but for once, she didn't try to hide them. So here's what's going to happen, Principal Warner finally spoke. The board, including your father, has been presented with evidence of everything: the cyberbullying, the grade manipulation, the false accusations against staff members. You have a choice to make. What choice? Jessica whispered. You can leave Riverside High, transfer somewhere else, start fresh, let your father's money smooth things over like always, MS. Rodriguez paused. Or you can stay and face what you've done. All of it. No more hiding behind fake accounts. No more threats. No more destroying lives for entertainment. And if I stay, then the real work begins. Weekly counseling sessions. A formal apology to everyone in this room and many who aren't. You'll work with our ed department to take down every cruel post, every fake account. You'll help develop an anti-bullying program. And most importantly, you'll learn what it means to be accountable for your actions. Jessica looked around the room again, seeing the impact of her actions reflected in every face. She thought of Sarah, lying in a hospital bed because of her. She thought of all the power she'd wielded, the fear she'd inspired, the lives she'd damaged. For the first time, she felt no pride in any of it, only shame. I'll stay, she whispered. Then louder, I want to stay. I need to make this right. It won't be easy, MS, Rodriguez warned. Making amends never is. But it's the only way forward. As the others filed out of the office, Jessica remained seated, the weight of everything she'd done finally settling on her shoulders. Through her tears, she noticed MS. Rodriguez had stayed behind. Why? Jessica asked. Why did you fight so hard to help me when I tried to destroy you? MS. Rodriguez smiled sadly. Because someone once fought for me when I was headed down a similar path. Sometimes the people who need help the most are the ones who think they need it least. Don't forget to subscribe to see how Jessica's journey of redemption unfolds. Sometimes the biggest bully is the one we least expect, the person we see in the mirror. But you won't believe what happens next in Jessica's story. But first, remember to smash that subscribe button. The therapy office felt uncomfortably small to Jessica. Dr. Martinez sat across from her, patient and unreadable, while Jessica stared at the clock on the wall. 20 minutes into their first mandatory session, and she hadn't said a word. We can sit in silence for the whole hour, Dr. Martinez said calmly. But that won't help Sarah heal. Or you. I'm not the one who needs healing, Jessica snapped, then immediately regretted it. This defensive response was exactly what had landed her here. No, Dr. Martinez raised an eyebrow. Happy people don't systematically destroy others, Jessica. The words hit hard. Jessica shifted in her chair, her designer outfit suddenly feeling like armor she didn't deserve to wear. I didn't mean for Sarah to. She couldn't finish the sentence. Let's talk about before Sarah, Dr. Martinez suggested. When did it start? This need to control, to hurt others before they could hurt you. Jessica opened her mouth to deny it, but something stopped her. She thought back to 7th grade, to the day everything changed. I was 12, she said quietly. My mother was hosting this huge charity gala. She'd been planning it for months. I heard her on the phone, telling her friend how perfect everything had to be, how she couldn't stand anything embarrassing her in front of the board members' wives. Jessica's voice trembled slightly. That night I overheard those same women talking about us. About how new money never quite fits in, how my mother tried too hard, how I was provincial. Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. What did you do? I destroyed them, Jessica whispered. Not the wives, their daughters. They were in my class. I learned everything about them, their secrets, their insecurities. Within a month, none of them would even look at me. And my mother, she was so proud when their mothers started sucking up to her. She never knew why. The memory hung in the air between them. Jessica felt exposed, raw. And that's when you learn that power comes from making others powerless. Jessica nodded, tears forming. It worked. Nobody ever called us provincial again. Nobody dared. Over the next few weeks, more memories surfaced in therapy. The constant pressure to be perfect. The way her parents measured love in achievements. The crushing loneliness of being surrounded by people who feared you. One session, Dr. Martinez asked her to write letters to everyone she'd hurt. Not to send, just to acknowledge the impact she'd had. "Dear Sarah," she wrote, hands shaking. "I'm sorry I saw your kindness as weakness. I'm sorry I used your trust as a weapon. I'm sorry I almost." The letter remained unfinished, tear-stained. In the school hallways, Jessica learned to walk differently, not with the old swagger of power, but with careful awareness. She noticed things now: how students still flinched when she passed, how conversations stopped mid-sentence. "It's like being a recovering addict," she told Dr. Martinez, "but my drug was other people's fear." Her first real test came during lunch period. She overheard Ashley, her former lieutenant, planning to spread rumors about a freshman girl. "Stop," Jessica said quietly. Ashley froze. "What?" I said. "Stop." Jessica met her eyes. "We're not doing that anymore. Any of it." "Since when do you care?" "Since I realized that making others feel small doesn't make us bigger." Jessica stood up. "It just makes us worse people." That afternoon, she asked Ms. Rodriguez if she could start an anonymous support group for bullying victims. The teacher's surprise quickly turned to cautious approval. "It won't fix what I did," Jessica acknowledged. "But maybe it can prevent someone else from doing the same things." Small changes became bigger ones. She deleted her fake social media accounts. She raised her hand in class instead of intimidating others into silence. She started eating lunch alone, giving people space to heal from her presence. One day she found a note in her locker: "I see you trying. Keep going. Emma." That evening in therapy, Jessica finally finished her letter to Sarah. Dr. Martinez read it silently, then looked up with approval. "You're ready to make amends," she said. "Really make them. Are you prepared for that?" Jessica thought about Sarah, still recovering at home. About all the others she'd hurt. About the person she'd been and the person she wanted to become. "No," she admitted. "But I'm going to do it anyway." Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, and subscribe to see if Jessica's victims can find it in their hearts to forgive her. This is it, the moment you've all been waiting for. But before we get to the ending that changed everything, make sure you're subscribed. The Riverside High auditorium was packed. Jessica stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the microphone. In the front row, Sarah sat between her mother and Ms. Rodriguez. She'd returned to school just a week ago, and this was the first time they'd been in the same room since that terrible night. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about how to start this speech," Jessica began, her voice quiet but steady. "About how to apologize for years of cruelty. The truth is, there are no words big enough to contain all my regret." She looked out at the sea of faces: students she'd terrorized, teachers she'd threatened, lives she'd impacted in ways she was only now beginning to understand. "I used to think power meant making others feel small. I was wrong. Real power is having the courage to face your mistakes and do the work to become better." To Sarah, to Ms. Rodriguez. "To everyone in this room, I can't undo what I did, but I can promise to spend every day working to be someone different, someone better." Sarah wiped away a tear, meeting Jessica's eyes for the first time. There was no forgiveness there, not yet, but there was something like understanding. That's why today, with Principal Warner's support, I'm announcing the creation of the Riverside Restoration Project. It's not just an anti-bullying program, it's a commitment to healing, to giving voices back to those who were silenced, to making this school a place where power comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. Jessica stepped away from the podium, walking to the front row. She knelt in front of Sarah, offering a sealed envelope. "This is my personal apology to you," she said softly. "You don't have to read it now, or ever, but I needed you to know that I understand now what I did to you, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Sarah took the envelope with shaking hands. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she whispered. "I know," Jessica replied. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to prove that people can change." As the assembly ended, Ms. Rodriguez approached Jessica. "That was a brave thing you did." "It's just the beginning," Jessica said. "The hard part comes next." Over the following months, small changes became visible. The restoration project gained momentum. Jessica worked with the IT department to create a cyberbullying detection system. She started a peer counseling program. And slowly, the fear in people's eyes when they saw her began to fade. One day she passed Sarah in the hallway. Instead of looking away, Sarah gave her a small nod. It wasn't friendship, maybe it never would be, but it was acknowledgement of growth, of change, of possibility. "You know, Ms. Rodriguez told her after class that day, the hardest person to forgive is often yourself." Jessica thought about the girl she'd been, the person she was becoming, and the long road still ahead. "I'm learning," she said simply. And she was. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe. Remember, it's never too late to change your story. Share this video if you believe in second chances, and leave a comment about a time when you chose to become better. Because in the end, we all have the power to rewrite our own endings. End of